Hi, Dr. Atchison here, and we're still talking about Chapter 7, Piaget and Vygotsky. We are on the 6th video, the 6th lecture, and now we're finally talking about Vygotsky and his sociocultural approach. Okay, so the sociocultural approach, as you would guess by the name, really emphasizes both the social and cultural processes. So he really looked at it where Piaget looked at it from the individual. Vygotsky looked at it in the context of the individual's environment. And so Piaget was saying the individual is acting on the environment, and that's how they're learning. And Vygotsky is really saying, well, the environment is acting on the child. And that's a lot of where learning comes from. So we'll talk a little bit about these theoretical frameworks. We'll talk about some of his themes. But again, he looked at this from a cultural historical perspective. So he really looked at this, not only the environment that the individual is in now, but that history over time of how that culture has shifted has impacted that child's development. And so he really looked at mental development, cognitive development from this social perspective. So it is cognitive development, how they're thinking and learning. But again, he's looking at it through this very social lens. That he's saying that learning is coming out of social interaction. He says that thoughts and actions are really mediated by cultural tools and different artifacts. And we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. He also looked at his theory from various temporal contexts, so various time contexts. So remember we said that context was really important here. He looked at it in 4 different perspectives. The first of it is ontogenetic, and that is looking at the individual. Okay, so basically what Piaget did was all ontogenetic development. He was looking at it through the individual. And so kind of his stage theory is looking at it from that developmental span of individuals. And he looked at it kind of on average, but he looked at it from this ontogenetic perspective, okay? So Vygotsky did too. But he said, well, but that by itself isn't enough. That we need to look at these other contexts of time and see how they are influencing the individual as well. The other one he looked at was microgenetic, and that's kind of what it sounds like given the kinds of studies that we've talked about in the past, and this is really that moment-to-moment learning. So we're really zooming our lens in, super, super close, and we're looking at that moment-to-moment learning on specific tasks. You know, learning how to spell that word, learning how to read that word, really looking at that specific word and how you do that or not. The other perspective that he looked at, this other context that he looked at was phylogenetic. And this is looking at the development of the species itself, okay? And so he was interested in how our species developed this kind of all of the things that our species has done compared to other species. So when they look at this, they'll say, okay, well, why do humans have this form of language communication versus other animals that have a different form of communication? Why do humans use tools and most other animals do not use tools? And we do see that some other primates do use tools, but then looking at the differences between our tool use and their tool use, we'll see that other higher primates, other great apes, which we are a great ape, will use the stick as a tool to, you know, get out ants or get out, break something apart or use a rock to smash something. That's a tool use. But that's very different than our tool use while I'm sitting here at a laptop using a software tool to put my lecture on the internet for you. Those are very different kinds of tool use. And so phylogenetic development is going to look at how those different uses of tools developed in those species. And then finally, we talked about this one a little bit, that cultural historical development. And this is the legacy of various times has on this. I was recently reading an article about the word dine and how it's actually like a holdover from when France overtook England like seriously a long time ago. And the French were the refined ones, and the English were these rough and tumble people. And so we still hold vestiges of that in our language. And so that's going to be looking at that cultural historical perspective, that we have this legacy of various times that still are influencing our culture currently, our development specifically. Okay, so next I want to show you a video that will walk you some of the kind of major themes in Vygotsky.
According to Lev Vygotsky, children's learning takes place within the zone of proximal development. The difference between what a child can do alone without guidance and what a child can do with help. A child's level of independent problem solving may be quite different from what he or she can learn or accomplish with the guidance and assistance of others, parents, teachers, and peers.
Over the trees. Cow, cry the crows. We're so high we can see over the treetops too. We are above the timber line. Timber?
No, this one. Look at this rock wall.
When we're down the surface of rocks, it helps make rocks edge smooth. Old mountains have round tops.
Rounded.
Newer mountains are just millions of years for mountain to form, and it takes millions of years to wear them down again.
All this pasta coming.
One instructional method designed to draw on the zone of proximal development is scaffolding. Scaffolding is a method in which assistance by more knowledgeable others is aimed slightly above what the child can do on his or her own, creating an environment that actually enhances children's learning. As the child becomes more competent, the supports are gradually removed, and the child takes over.
What's the setting? Well, in Chrysanthemum, the setting was the classroom. The set. Where does this happen? Let's think about it. In a town called Calabria. So how are you going to show on this poster where this story happened? We know the name of the town is Calabria, but how are you going to show it? What kinds of things are you going to include?
Draw.
You're going to draw. That's how you're going to do it. But what?
Detail.
What kinds of details? What are you going to show?
Show the peoples and all the things that happen.
Tony, what's the resolution? How is this problem solved?
We're drawing this picture of Strawberry.
But how did she solve the problem?
Because she gave the fork to Big Anthony, and Big Anthony had to eat all the pasta.
But what did she do first? What did she have to do to that pasta pot?
Make it stop.
How did she make it?
Okay, so these are the themes that they talked about in the video. Zone of proximal development, and this is what a child can do on their own, and what they can do with the guidance of an adult or a more knowledgeable peer. So the first part of the video, there was that other little boy who kind of was a little bit ahead on reading. He was a peer, right? And he was helping him. And the zone of proximal development is what that child that was trying to read was doing, what he could do, again, by himself, and with that more knowledgeable peer. You can already see how this social place is playing a much different role than Piaget said for Vygotsky. He's including this role of socialization, this role of working with others, directly in his theory from the get-go. Scaffolding they talked about as well, and that was, again, adjusting the level of assistance to the child's performance. So again, kind of giving them enough support so that they can reach that next level. If you think about what scaffolding is on a building, it's so that you can kind of reach that next level on the building. You can get up higher. And it's that support system on the outside. And once you've kind of reached that, you can go up. Once you build that, you can kind of go up higher and higher. So think about building bricks on a building. You're going to build them from the bottom up, right? And you're going to start at the bottom, and eventually you're going to need a scaffold to get up higher. And you'll build that layer of blocks, and you'll have to scaffold it up higher and build that. It's that same idea, that you're adjusting the level of assistance in results to the child's performance. You can already see how integral Vygotsky's theory really is in our U.S. educational system. His theory is one that is definitely gets a lot of support from educators. They see, obviously, a big role in that because that's their whole job, is to teach. And so, again, the idea here of this guidance with an adult or more knowledgeable peer is very, very relevant to what they're doing. And guided participation, that young children become more competent by participating in activities under the guidance of experienced others. So again, that they can kind of learn more with that help of that other person. Again, that they're going to be able to kind of reach higher levels. And you can see that these three things aren't completely separate, that they're overlapping, that you can have scaffolding going on in that zone of proximal development, that you can have guided participation going on in conjunction with scaffolding in the zone of proximal development. So again, that these are all kind of working together in this way. But again, you can see this difference between Piaget is it really is focused on this social origin. The role of others are in promoting cognitive development. One of the things, again, that he's interested in is tool use. And that's the means, according to Vygotsky, the means that an individual have to achieve a desired goal. And that he says that we're learning to use these tools through interactions with others. And we'll talk about this a little bit more detail. That again, you're learning to use that hammer because you saw someone else use a hammer. You didn't just see a hammer one day and go, oh, you know what? I bet I know what this is for. It's for a nail. No, you saw someone take a hammer and hit a nail, and so you know a hammer's for a nail. That again, that you're learning this through interactions with others. And that children develop higher mental function, such as greater attention, deliberate memory, so that's like trying to remember something, and verbal thinking through this interactions with others. And we also see, he's going to focus on that there's differences between different cultures. So he's allowing that into his theory. Remember, that was a major drawback from Piaget, is that different cultures didn't have that same timeline. His was really centered on that Western culture, that Northern Western culture, and so again, it wasn't as universal as he kind of thought it was. Where Vygotsky's saying right off the bat, hey, it's all different. Okay, they're all different cultures, and so we're going to have different things. We're going to have children use toys differently. We're going to have different tools in different cultures. Thinking about the difference between a fork versus chopsticks. Those are culturally specific tools to those cultures in terms of eating. So again, we'll see that there are different toys and different interactions, and again, that they're learning this tool use through this interactions with others. We do see that there is mixed research findings on the importance of object exploration for children in different cultures. That again, that there may be some benefit for this exploration, but again, we're getting a lot of support that it again is being learned through the cultures, being learned through the social interactions with others. One thing that Piaget and Vygotsky both really saw as a very, very valuable tool was pretend play. So we already talked about Piaget and his view on pretend play in class. Vygotsky said, yes, super, super important. Now, he says that it's developing through interactions with others. Again, no surprise, that's what Vygotsky says, is again that these things are socially mediated. He says that it kind of changes, of course, across development, that it first really starts as kind of a solitary kind of thing, this pretend play, and then as the child develops and has more interactions with others, it starts to take on this socio-dramatic play, which is, when you think about playing house, that would be socio-dramatic play, that you cook and you take care of a baby and you do all these different things in playing house, that they're acting out the social interactions that they've seen with others in this dramatic play setting. He says that that make-believe play allows children to try out many skills within their zone of proximal development. So he sees pretend play as kind of a situation where they can use these skills that they can do in a really safe environment where there's not a lot of any consequences, really, if you mess them up. Okay, so again, he sees this pretend play as an opportunity to kind of practice these things, to practice these skills that they've learned through imitation, through observation with others, and through this social interaction. Now, this is actually the end of the slides we have for Vygotsky. Part of that is that we don't know as much about Vygotsky, and we don't have as many follow-ups to Vygotsky as we do to Piaget. Some of it also has to do with influence, but a lot of it is that Vygotsky was a Russian scientist, and we didn't really, in our Western kind of culture, know about him kind of as he was doing it. Piaget was publishing things kind of as he was doing them. I mean, we knew about it, but because there was not communication between cultures, we missed out on Vygotsky when he was doing it. So they kind of found all his work kind of after the fact and have gone back and investigated his theory. So we have less on it because it didn't have as much opportunity to be tested and adapted by Vygotsky himself. So that's all we have on Vygotsky. And we'll see you again later.